Welcome, Garrett. It's a pleasure to have you here. You've got a fascinating story, starting a podcast in high school and now co-founding two innovative insurtech companies. I don't know if I'm allowed to say your age. No, you look 16, but you're out of college. Okay, so
This is
um,
true.
so can you kick us off by sharing a bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today? I know you come from a family of insurance, but tell us more,
Yeah,
please.
I'll kind of go back to what you mentioned there with the podcast. So I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was kind of in the family, so knew something I wanted to do. Started a lawn and landscaping business when I was in high school and spent countless hours listening to podcasts while I was mowing lawns. I thought this would be a pretty cool thing to do. So at high school, I put together a podcast called Inside the Minds, and I really treated it as a way to meet other entrepreneurs and kind of as like a networking tool. Obviously, you're more likely to get people to talk to you if you have a podcast. So that ultimately led me to a job with a startup hosting their podcast, and that kind of got me into this startup and technology world. And then when ChatGPT came out, my brother and I were sitting there and we said, okay, well, this is the craziest thing we've ever seen. We know we want to do something. We know we want to build a business, but we didn't know what that business should be. And so we started just doing a bunch of different things. Like you said, my family has an insurance agency, so we were building different automations for them. But ultimately found a company that relies heavily on third parties. And they did not have a way to ensure that everybody in that network of third parties was properly vetted from a insurance, compliance, permitting, licensing perspective. And so we built that technology for them to sort of help them mitigate all the risk that is
Mhm.
naturally inherent in these
Mhm.
companies that are super reliant on other companies. And so we built that technology and quickly found that, hey, we're uncovering a lot of gaps in insurance. Instead of just finding the gaps, why don't we also fill those gaps? I mentioned that we were building automations for my family's insurance agency. And so that is when we decided to launch sort of this newest branch of the business, which is TradeGuard Insurance. And the reason it's focused on the trades, our technology side is focused on the trades as well. The industry with the most reliance on third parties is construction. And so our technology helps the GCs manage all of their subcontractors. And then our insurance agency helps sell the insurance to those subcontractors.
Mhm.
And so we're utilizing kind of all the best AI technologies that we built for the family, streamlining operations, and kind of thinking about, if we were to build an agency from scratch using the technology that is best, what would that look like? And so that's the approach we're taking with TradeGuard.
Wonderful. Okay, right. So LightDoc helps general contractors, you just said, manage permits, licenses, certificates, insurance, routing gaps to TradeGuard. And can you walk us through a typical client's journey with LightDoc and how TradeGuard then steps in so that
Yeah,
it's more specific,
absolutely.
concrete?
So if you are a general contractor, what we'll do, it is very technology based, but it's really a sort of done for you service. So we start with an onboarding call to understand who exactly are you working with.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of define what we call personas. And each persona has a different set of requirements, right? You're going to have a different requirement for somebody who is maybe just doing the landscaping as opposed to somebody who is installing the roof. And so
Mm-hmm.
we define those personas, define the requirements within them. A big part of that is insurance. And so we provide a lot of guidance on what should you be requiring from an insurance perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Once
Mm-hmm.
the personas and requirements are set up, it's pretty much all in our hands from there. So as the GC, you'll basically say, hey, here's the 20 to 100 different subs I want to have in my system. We'll go through the process of onboarding them. They get a link directly to their inbox that says, here's all the requirements you need to meet. They then upload the various documents. That could be business licenses, sometimes financial documents if they want financial due diligence. Like I mentioned, sort of OSHA certifications, all sorts of different stuff. And we can customize that to whatever that GC wants. And so once the subcontractor has uploaded all of that information, that's where the AI comes in, analyzes everything, and basically just compares what do you have to what you need. And if we find a gap there, that's what we flag. And if it's a gap related to insurance or bonds, it gets routed to TradeGuard. We patch that gap and update the compliance status. And so as a general contractor, all you have to do is tell us who your subcontractors are, what persona they are, and then you have a dashboard where you can go in and see everybody's compliance status at any given time.
Just for people who are not in insurtech, so can you tell us, the 30-year family's experience and business? So how does that deep industry knowledge informs the technology you're building?
hmm Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about specifically on the TradeGuard side, which again is sort of the insurance agency side of
Yeah.
things. What we were able to do while we were building automations for the family and actually trying to sell to other agencies is we realized just how broken the technology is. And there's two basically agency management systems that everybody uses, and they're very closed off in terms of APIs. And if we want to ship a new automation, well, now we have to worry about Vertifor's archaic API and try to configure things to that. And so we didn't like that aspect of it. And what we did instead was basically built our own agency management system that we're able to go in and create an automation. And within a few hours, we can ship something that previously would not have been possible.
Mm,
And we're using sort of different modern tools for that. Airtable is our kind of back-end system. It
sure.
is incredible what you can do with that. I basically started off by just going into their AI. It's called Omni, I believe. We went into there and said, hey, here's kind of the PRD of what we need this thing to do. And pretty quickly it spit out an entire interface that looks a lot better than Vertifor or Epic, in my humble opinion. And
Hmm.
so that is kind of how we're taking the approach is, like I said, if we were to strip this down and start from scratch, knowing what we know today, what would we build? And the issue, I think, with a lot of insurance agencies that have been operating for 30 years, sometimes 100 plus years, everybody in the industry knows that these systems are horrible, but nobody can change it because they have 30 to 100 years of business that's stacked on top of it. And so
Mm,
we didn't want to have to ever get into that situation where everything we have is on an old system that we don't even like. And so
mm.
that was a really big takeaway that we had is this technology sucks, humbly. Everybody agrees it does, and nobody's willing to make a difference. So let's not put ourselves in that position.
Got it. So when we spoke prior to this podcast, you shared very strong opinions on AI in the insurance space, focusing on the back end of
hmm
automation to reduce risk rather than the consumer-facing tools. So could you expand on
hmm
that perspective and give examples of where AI is most impactful in your operations?
hmm Yeah, like so I mentioned it to you, but what we like to look at, kind of in general, you can apply it to really any business, but sort of the first question you should ask yourself as a business owner is, what is the recurring, repetitive, and sort of non-revenue generating tasks that my employees are spending time on? And
Hmm.
to us, that is the area that's ripe for AI. And this isn't anything necessarily novel, right? If you look at the insurtechs that is out there, the market is flooded with policy checking, proposal generation. There's all sorts of tools that meet that exact thing, right? The back office tasks. But where we take it a little differently is the build versus buy.
Yeah.
And yes, there's plenty of tools that you can go and grab off the shelf that are fantastic, but so much of the innovation that has happened in the AI space is not, I mean, yes, it is at the model level, but it's at the level that is allowing people like me, somebody who's, I don't have a computer science degree, but I'm able to build these incredible automations I have AI telling me how to build AI. And I just think if you're an owner of a business, you can build basically your own network of agents that you own and can customize as opposed to kind of just grabbing these off the shelf items. So, yeah, I think everybody knows that policy checking and kind of the basics is where to apply AI. But whether you build versus buy, I think that is kind of where the strong take might have been.
So let's discuss this build versus buy discussion because I think it's critical. So you're building your own army of agents. That's what you just
Yep.
said. What are the key advantages you see in this approach for your business and for the general contractor market?
hmm I think it's just the ability to iterate really quickly. If you see a change and
Mhm.
you're using somebody else's product, you're reliant on their timeline. What does their product roadmap look like? You can tell them, hey, I'd like to see this change. And they'll tell you, okay, absolutely. But they have five other customers that are also telling them that, and they might all sort of interfere with each other. Whereas if you own the product, you can make those changes very fast. And like I said, if you're built and plugged into these modern systems like an Airtable or maybe like a Salesforce. So maybe Airtable is probably the lower level. If you go one above that Salesforce,
Sure.
you can iterate quickly and plug it into that central database.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, does
Okay.
that kind of answer the question?
Mhm. It does. It does. So let's move on to your biggest challenges in the current insurtech, landscape, especially
Mhm.
concerning GCs, general contractors, and underwriting. So what are the some of the biggest challenges you face?
So I spent a lot of time looking at the landscape of carrier APIs. And, in my opinion, the biggest bottleneck in insurance is that time between you're collecting initial sort of data points from a prospect to the policy is bound, right? There's all of the data collection, you're filling out forms, you get supplemental applications. That's where so much time is spent. And there's kind of two approaches to that today. There's the API approach, where you can go to a rater and you put in basic information. It's a lot easier. It's all digital. But the issue with the APIs is the more digital first you go, the more limited the product lines become. And so maybe you can find a great API for general liability, but it's going to be general liability for a specific type of business that's under a certain amount of revenue,
Sure.
which makes sense, right? The less underwriting questions there are, the more limited scope there's going to be. So that's kind of the limits that I found with API, which is frustrating because it feels so close and it's like, yes, that is exactly what I need. But if I have a customer that doesn't meet this very specific box, then it's not going to work. Or I need seven different APIs to make it work. And then on the other hand, you have the traditional version, which is, like I said, filling out the accords manually, going through everything via email. And we're kind of taking a unique approach to that, where I mentioned sort of this army of AI agents. So instead of having to deal with the carrier APIs, we're going to be utilizing these agents to kind of take on that traditional work. So meet the market where it's at, right? And that's kind of the approach we're taking, which will be interesting to see how that works. But in terms of kind of to sum that up, where are the issues that I see in the technical challenges, it's in that process of quote to bind.
That timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the hard part is the supplemental documents are so variable, right? Accord forms are easy. It's the same thing every time. You know exactly where on the PDF to put the data. But supplemental applications change so much, and then the appetites change so much. And it's that variable that makes it hard to create a predictable workflow around.
Yeah. Agreed. Good work. Good thinking. So what's your next level in short-term goals then, my friend?
Yeah, I would say sort of the next level is trying to get to that point that I just mentioned there, where we're not having to manually oversee all of these back and forth emails. And I'm very curious to see where the API market goes because you can definitely see the carriers are leaning into it more. I think they're realizing that more and more people are buying insurance digitally. And so I would love to see in kind of the 3 year term that increase more.
Hmm.
But in the long term, we're really excited to see how this approach, specifically with this niche market of general contractors and the risk associated with it, how we can kind of disrupt that whole market. General contractors are typically not treated very great by carriers because the underwriters is underwriting the general contractor, but the subcontractors are the ones that create all the risk. And so that is a lot of times why carriers will just say, hey, I'm not going to do 100% subcontracted general contractors. That's not in our appetite. And I think our technology has an incredible ability to solve that gap of getting the data needed to get these GCs
Sure.
cheaper insurance.
Hmm. So what are your short-term goals from a business standpoint for this year?
For this year, yeah, I mean, we kind of just launched really this new model a couple weeks ago, and we've seen amazing traction so far. And so we're going to be really pushing forward heavily on the content space. There's a big sort of niche online of trades business owners who have an online presence, and so we're going to be pushing that quite heavily, and then hoping to get to seven figures in revenue this year, and just kind of keep it steady. But that's the short term goal, and just chip away at that long term vision.
So that's an ambitious one, seven figures, right? So
got to
What are the
dream
key
big.
strategies you're implementing to reach that milestone in the
Yeah,
next
so
week four, starting week four now, or week three? Of
I'm a big fan of Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you know him.
course, yes, yes, yes.
But the key strategies are really utilizing what he calls kind of the core four,
Mhm,
and that is the free content, which is what I just talked about,
mhm,
having paid ads as well put into there. Our affiliate program we've been building out, and that's been going really, really well. And so those are kind of the three areas we're focusing on. And I actually, my day is blocked out based on the core four. So if you look at my calendar, it's literally just the core four, and here's how much time I'm spending on free content, so
Free
on and so
content,
forth.
affiliations, repeat the other two.
Paid ads,
Yeah,
and then there is cold outreach and sort of warm outreach. He has two buckets. There's like the core four, and then there's an additional four. We're kind of pulling a few from each of those. Cold outreach, we don't, our approach is we cold email is not the most productive
sure.
means of sales, so not focusing on that as much.
Plus, you have a network, no, in
Exactly.
this industry. Yeah, for sure, for sure. All good stuff. So you hinted at a long-term vision of becoming your own career.
Mm,
All right, leveraging data to provide cheaper underwriting for GCs, so general contractors. So that's a significant disruption.
yes.
Can you elaborate on how you see that unfolding and the data's role in it?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the data is the key. So starting with making sure we can get all of this data, and the more general contractors we can have under the LightDoc technology, the more subcontractors we have in that network, the better our data will be.
Hmm.
And then it's really just about kind of moving up the food chain of the insurance stack, if you will. So at the top, there's the carrier, then you got sort of MGAs, and where we're at is kind of this lower level of brokers. And where our plan is to just kind of rung by rung move our way up. And we'll see where it takes us. Obviously, that is a lofty goal and major disruption, but it's get the data and move our way up the up the food chain.
Hmm. Okay, and how do you see that, multi-layered business model evolve over the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years? What's the, maybe it's too far?
The goal or the timeline?
No, the timeline. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think how the AI evolves will be a big sort
Factor.
of
Yeah.
component of that, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
changes every day, so it's hard to say. But I think the common theme we're focused on here is a lot of times you hear AI and risk as going sort of hand in hand. AI is risky and kind of has somewhat of a negative connotations in certain circles. And what we want to do is figure out how can we use AI to decrease risk and
Mhm.
understand risk.
Sure.
And so that will be, I think, will only become easier and easier as these models get better.
Hmm. Wonderful. So there's another aspect to all of it, is that you're a team of three, right?
Yes.
Good. So what are your biggest internal challenges right now, particularly regarding technical talent, capital, and keeping the three together?
That is, yeah,
Like
that is
your
the
voice.
challenge. And it is, we have a lot on our plate and there's a lot to be done. And so the biggest challenge is, yeah, how do we have the technical talent we need while balancing the revenue? And we don't want to go and raise a bunch of more money.
Hmm.
With coverage, for example, I don't know if you've seen them. They just had a big launch. They raised like $43 million from Sequoia, and we don't want to do that. I think we can achieve a fairly similar outcome with a lot less money, given the way AI is increasing productivity on the
Hmm.
coding side. I mean, for example, I built a web app this last week. 2 weeks ago, I had no idea how to build a web app.
Hmm.
And that's incredible, right? I mean, that's 1 week of somebody who has very little technical background. And I think we're going to utilize that as much as we can, get to the point where revenue is able to say, okay, we'll bring on one more individual. Because one more individual today, when they're coupled with AI, is a lot more productive than one more individual, say 5 years ago.
Hmm. 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 Good. So if you could convey one key message, my young friend, to our audience about AI, risk, and the future of insurance, what would it be?
Hmm. Well, I think if we look at recently, I think like 2 days ago, 3 days ago, Lemonade, the insurance company, Lemonade, just said that they're going to reduce the rates by 50% on any vehicles who are using full self-driving from Tesla. That is a pretty substantial change in the market, right? And the reason is because they have the data to prove that through this AI and the self-driving, it is significantly safer than a human driving. And my message is, how do we apply that same exact concept to every other market there is, right? And I think when you think about construction, there's what we're doing, which is just
Hmm.
understanding the risk and understanding who's covered along these massive networks. But then you start to think about, okay, well, now you have humanoid robotics coming into it, and now you have no workers' comp claims, and now they never take a day off, and now there's no slip and fall issues. And I think that would be the message to end with is just how can you apply what Lemonade did with FSD to every other industry?
Hmm. All right, that's ambitious, but that makes total sense. That makes total sense. So, just rapidly, a call to action for your partners, your two partners. What would you tell them? Are you communicating with them like totally openly, or is there something that you would like to tell them?
My two partners,
Yes, absolutely.
I would say put your seatbelts on because this rocket ship's about to take off.
Hmm. Who is the leading founder? Were you all equal founders, or I mean,
Yeah, we're
is it somebody came up with the first idea, or
well, the first idea we came up with is not what we're doing today. So that's long gone. But my brother is the CEO of the company, and so he's kind of the lead in sales and makes sort of the final decisions. But we're all equal in terms of sort of our each we have different domains that we kind of each control. So yeah,
okay, is he younger or older?
he's older. That would be crazy if he was younger.
Well, who knows, Let's disrupt, right?
Yeah,
Hierarchy.
yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tell me the three roles. Your brother is
Yeah,
a
so
CEO. Yeah.
he's a CEO. He kind of leads the sales side on LightDoc. Vrain is our CTO, and he does all the major technical work. And then I lead this TradeGuard insurance side and a lot
Yeah.
of like kind of operations and very operationally minded. So if there's
Yeah.
like a system that we need to kind of break down, that's kind of where I come in.
Hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So, maybe you'll come back 1 year from now and we'll see where you're at and what
Yes.
AI is at. Okay, that would be my pleasure to have you again. Thank you very much, Garrett. A real
Thanks
pleasure.
so much for having me.
Of
Appreciate it.
course. My pleasure. Okay, take care.
Bye.